Thurgood Marshall didn't look like a revolutionary. He wore double-breasted suits and was mocked for his light skin and wavy hair. But before Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X rose to prominence, it was Marshall who had a gigantic impact on race relations by helping to end legal segregation in America in the landmark Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education. Marshall was born in 1908 in Baltimore, where his family had stood up against racism for generations. In those days, segregation was the law of the land. In 1896, the Supreme Court had decided in Plessy versus Ferguson that schools and facilities for whites and blacks could be separate but equal. Marshall decided to become a lawyer because, in his words, the lawyer was there to bear the brunt of getting rid of segregation. After graduating from Howard University School of Law, Marshall took a trip to the South to see the effects of separate but equal firsthand. By 1938, he was a staff lawyer for the NAACP in New York and began crafting lawsuits that could chip away at segregation. The hardest part was recruiting plaintiffs. Many black parents were afraid of losing their jobs or of exposing their families to violence. But in 1951, 13 parents in Topeka, Kansas, led by an assistant pastor named Oliver Brown, put their names on an NAACP lawsuit in federal court. Marshall lost the Kansas case and another one in South Carolina. But in 1953, the U.S. Supreme Court announced that it would take on his appeal, not just to those cases, but to 5 separate cases that challenged segregation. The combined cases became known as Brown versus Board of Education. On May 17, 1954, the court's decision came down.
Shortly after noon, Earl Warren, the Chief Justice of the United States, began to read a unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court. Ruling in 5 cases in which 5 Negro children sought the right to go to the same schools as white children, the court said, "Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal."
Everyone knew the unanimous 9-0 decision would bring enormous change, especially Marshall himself.
We do believe that this decision in itself will encourage the people to take further steps without litigation in many areas.
Further steps were taken in later years, following in the wake of Marshall's success, in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the University of Alabama, and in Boston. Integration wasn't easy, and 25 years after the Brown decision, Topeka, Kansas was still segregated.
Even today, the other schools here are not fully integrated, primarily because of housing patterns. Most black people live in one part of town, whites in another, so many neighborhood schools are largely segregated.
But Thurgood Marshall, by that time a Supreme Court justice himself, never stopped believing that using the law to overturn segregation was the way to bring racial justice to America.